Michael Turner had always believed that Golden Hearth Bakery stood for more than just pastries. It was supposed to be about warmth, community, and care, both for the customers and the people behind the counter. Years ago, when he opened the very first location with just a single oven and a dream, Michael had known every staff member by name. But now, after expanding to 50 stores across the state and spending his days in boardrooms instead of backrooms, something had changed. Lately, the reports crossing his desk didn't match the brand he thought he was leading. Rising turnover, quiet complaints about management, and declining morale, it was enough to raise concern. But when his executives brushed it off with tidy graphs and polished presentations, Michael knew he couldn't rely on filtered data anymore. So he made a bold decision to go undercover. No cameras, no media stunt, just him, a hair dye kit, a trimmed beard, and a pair of plain glasses. With the help of a trusted operations officer, Michael was placed at one of Golden Hearth's busiest downtown locations, under the alias Mike, a new trainee with no bakery experience. Most of the current staff had never seen the CEO in person, and that anonymity worked to his advantage. His expensive suits were swapped for a standard black Golden Hearth apron, and the only paperwork he reviewed now was the morning delivery manifest. He wasn't there to inspect the store as a boss. He wanted to live a day in the life of the people he'd forgotten. The moment he walked through the doors of the downtown bakery, Michael felt the shift. The cozy smell of cinnamon and fresh bread clashed with the palpable tension in the air. The manager on duty, Tracy, offered him a cursory nod before immediately delegating his training to a floor employee. "Lauren will show you the ropes," she said almost dismissively before returning to her clipboard. That's when he met Lauren, a young woman in her 20s, with flour on her shirt and fatigue in her eyes. She gave him a weary smile and a quiet, "Don't worry, it's not rocket science." There was kindness in her voice, but it was worn thin from long hours and too many responsibilities. As she guided him through the prep area, showing him how to measure dough label inventory and manage the tight counter space, Michael watched her closely. Not as an executive, but as a human being trying to understand another's burden. Lauren moved quickly, her hands marked with small burns and dry from constant exposure to dough and cleaning agents. She never stopped moving, barely paused to breathe, and yet made an effort to explain everything with patience. Michael could tell she was carrying more than her fair share of the load, and not just physically. It was in her posture, in the way she glanced nervously toward the front whenever Tracy's voice echoed through the store. By mid-morning, the pace had intensified. The lines stretched out the door, the ovens beeped in cycles, and the air was thick with urgency. Michael found himself running trays, restocking napkins, wiping tables, whatever he could to help. He noticed how quickly Lauren jumped between roles from cashier to baker to mentor, while Tracy hovered near the register critiquing but never contributing. Michael was sweating confused and struggling to keep up, and yet Lauren offered a brief grin whenever she saw him trying. Still, he could see the toll it was taking. She didn't just look tired, she looked depleted. It wasn't until they had a brief lull that Michael finally asked, "Do you ever get a break?" Lauren chuckled dryly. "If I stop, everything falls apart." Her words weren't dramatic, they were factual. That was the moment. Michael felt the first crack in his carefully curated view of his company. This wasn't a thriving workplace. It was survival mode, and Lauren, one of the pillars keeping it all standing, was on the edge of collapse. He began to question everything: his leadership, his systems, and most painfully the illusion of care his company had been projecting. As the shift continued, Michael took mental notes of every interaction, every strained glance, every corner of the store that wasn't just physically cluttered, but emotionally charged. This wasn't just a bad day. This was the norm, and it had been allowed to go unchecked because people like him had become too distant. That night, as he sat alone in his car reviewing the notes he'd scribbled on the back of his training manual, Michael made a promise to himself. He hadn't gone undercover to play detective. He had come to rediscover what it meant to lead with purpose, and the journey was only just beginning. The chaos hit like a tidal wave the moment the clock struck 9. Customers flooded into the small downtown bakery, their voices mingling with the hum of espresso machines and the frantic beeping of order tickets. Michael, still adjusting to his new role as Mike the trainee, quickly realized that mornings at Golden Hearth weren't just busy, they were overwhelming. The line snaked out the front door within minutes, and the limited counter space turned into a frantic dance floor of half-shouted instructions and elbow-to-elbow movement. In the middle of it all was Lauren, moving like someone with 1,000 tasks and only 2 hands. She darted between the register, the ovens, and the supply shelves with mechanical precision, multitasking without a break in rhythm. Her exhaustion was no longer subtle. It radiated from every step. Michael tried his best to keep up, fumbling with trays of croissants and wiping down counters, but it became clear that he was merely trying not to be in the way. Tracy, the store manager, stood planted near the register, barking orders with sharpness that cut through the din. "Lauren, you forgot the lemon glaze again." She snapped across the store loud enough for several customers to turn their heads when a young barista named Chloe fumbled an order. Tracy scoffed, "Maybe you should go back to reading order slips before you make another mess." She offered no help, only criticism, and never once stepped in to relieve the pressure from her team. Her clipboard might as well have been a weapon, the way she clutched it while delivering blow after blow to morale. What disturbed Michael the most was how normalized it all felt. No one flinched at Tracy's tone. The employees barely reacted to her harsh comments, as if they'd grown numb to it. Over time, Lauren, ever the resilient one, simply bit her lip and powered through, but Michael caught a flicker in her eyes, something between frustration and resignation. At one point, when the register jammed and the customer line backed up into the street, Tracy didn't lift a finger to help. Instead, she scolded Chloe again, right in front of a waiting customer, for being too slow to think on her feet. The customer, visibly uncomfortable, looked away. Michael felt his jaw tighten. He had built this company to bring joy to customers and employees alike, but what he was seeing was anything but joyful. As the orders piled up, Michael saw Lauren reach for the pastry boxes with trembling hands. She miscounted a set of muffins, quickly corrected herself, and whispered a barely audible apology to a customer who hadn't even noticed. She hadn't taken a break all morning. Neither had anyone else. There was no time. Tracy paced like a hawk, but never once offered to step behind the counter. The atmosphere was tense and brittle, like one more wrong move could send everything crashing down. Michael was now drenched in sweat, but not from the heat of the ovens. It was the weight of watching something he created spiral into a version of itself he didn't recognize, and it was getting harder by the minute to stay silent. A particularly rough moment came just before noon when a new employee spilled a tray of drinks near the register. Tracy didn't help clean. Instead, she raised her voice so everyone, customers included, could hear her say, "This is what happens when we hire kids who can't pay attention." The young employee turned red, clearly fighting back tears. Michael's heart sank. He wasn't just witnessing operational strain. He was watching emotional damage unfold in real time. He remembered the training brochures, the company mission statement printed in cursive font. Golden Hearth is where warmth meets work, where people matter most. And yet, here he was standing in a bakery where fear had replaced fulfillment. By the time the lunch rush finally subsided, the staff looked like they'd run a marathon. Lauren leaned against the prep table, quietly breathing through her exhaustion before getting back to slicing loaves for a large catering order. Michael approached her gently, asking if she wanted him to handle the slicing instead. She smiled weakly. "Thanks. But if I stop, we fall behind again." Her words echoed the ones she had said the day before. This wasn't an exception. This was her every day. That realization struck Michael harder than he expected. He had always known that running a bakery was hard work, but this was unsustainable. As the team regrouped and mopped up the remnants of the morning madness, Michael stood quietly in the back corner, observing more than helping now. His heart was heavy. He had once dreamed of opening a business that celebrated its people. But somewhere along the way, that dream had gotten buried under expansion plans, investor meetings, and spreadsheets. He couldn't unsee what he had witnessed today, and while the store was back in order for the next wave of customers, Michael knew things were anything but okay. Something had to change, and for the first time in years, he realized that the responsibility rested squarely on his shoulders. It was sometime in the late afternoon when the store finally began to quiet. The buzz of the morning rush had faded into a tired lull, and the air inside the bakery now carried the heavy stillness of exhaustion. Michael had just finished restocking the display with what remained of the day's pastries when he noticed that Lauren had disappeared. She had been a constant presence on the floor, juggling tasks, customers, and mistakes that weren't even hers. Now, without her, the energy felt noticeably off. He wandered toward the back of the store, passing racks of cooling trays and bags of flour, until he heard it. A faint, muffled sound coming from behind the storage room door. It was quiet, but unmistakable. Someone was crying. Michael hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed open the door. Inside, amidst boxes of paper goods and crates of ingredients, he saw Lauren sitting on an overturned milk crate, her elbows on her knees, face buried in her hands. Her shoulders trembled with each quiet sob, and her apron was bunched in her lap like she'd pulled it off in frustration. For a second, he stood frozen. This wasn't part of the plan. He had come to observe, not interfere, but everything in him said this couldn't be ignored. "Lauren," he said softly, his voice stripped of its disguise. She flinched and quickly wiped her eyes, turning her face away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to gather herself. "Just give me a minute." "Okay." Michael walked a little closer and crouched down beside her, keeping his tone gentle. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "I just want to make sure you're all right." She was quiet for a moment, then let out a long, tired breath. "I'm just tired," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been working back-to-back shifts because we're so short-staffed, and Tracy keeps piling more on me like it's nothing I asked for one day off last week. Just one, and she told me if I couldn't handle it, I should quit." Her eyes welled up again, but she blinked the tears away. "But I can't quit. I need this job. Rent's due, and I've got no backup plan." Hearing that something shifted in Michael, the weight of her words hit him like a punch to the chest. Here she was, someone who showed up early, stayed late, held the entire store together, and yet she was being driven to a breaking point. He thought back to all the glowing performance reviews Tracy had submitted to corporate. According to her reports, the store was thriving, but now he saw it for what it really was, a well-polished illusion hiding a broken system. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone," he said, finally, his voice tight. Lauren gave him a tired, ironic smile. "That's just how it is around here. No one listens unless it affects the numbers." She stood up and wiped her hands on her jeans, trying to regain composure. "Anyway, I should get back out there. If Tracy sees me back here, I'll never hear the end of it." Michael wanted to stop her to say more, but he held back. He wasn't ready to reveal who he was, not yet. He needed to see more. He needed to understand how deep the problem went, but what he did know beyond any doubt was that what Lauren had shown him couldn't be unseen. This wasn't just a single bad day. It was a warning bell, and it was ringing loud. As Lauren walked back onto the floor, straightening her apron and forcing a smile for a customer, Michael remained in the storage room, still crouched beside the crate. He looked around at the cluttered shelves and the dusty light filtering in from a small high window. This place, the literal and figurative back of his business, wasn't just where supplies were kept. It was where pain was hidden, where the people who kept his company alive were pushed to cry alone in silence. That realization sank in with a bitter chill. He had built Golden Hearth to be a source of warmth, but somehow behind the brand, the warmth had been replaced with pressure and fear. That night, as he left the store and sat in his car under the streetlight, Michael didn't drive away immediately. He stared at the front window of the bakery, where customers now sat chatting over coffee, oblivious to what had unfolded behind the scenes. He thought of Lauren's cracked hands. Tracy's dismissive tone, Chloe's embarrassment, and most of all, the silent tears in the storage room. It was clear now he hadn't just drifted from the company's day-to-day operations. He drifted from its heart, and if he didn't act soon, the damage might spread far beyond this one store. Golden Hearth needed to change, but first he needed to face the truth he had ignored for too long. The following morning, Michael arrived at the bakery before sunrise. The streets were still quiet, and the first rays of light were just starting to bounce off the downtown buildings. He stood outside for a moment, coffee in hand, watching the reflection of the Golden Hearth bakery sign in the window. Despite the warm glow of the brand's name, the memories of the previous day haunted him. The image of Lauren breaking down in the storage room, the indifference of Tracy, and the silence of the other staff. They looped in his mind like a reel of truths he could no longer ignore. Today he wasn't just there to observe. He needed to understand how deep the dysfunction ran. When he stepped inside, the store was already humming with quiet activity. Lauren was there as usual, setting up the pastry display with careful precision. She greeted him with a nod, her face showing clear signs of exhaustion, though she managed a faint smile. "You're early," she said, glancing at the clock. "Most people try to get in as late as possible." Michael smiled politely. "Just wanted a head start," he replied, keeping his cover intact. As they worked side by side in the quiet before the morning rush, he watched Lauren move with practiced skill, but also with a heaviness in her posture that hadn't been there the first day. It was a different kind of tired, the kind that didn't go away with sleep. Before long, Tracy arrived. Her presence shifted the energy in the room immediately. The quiet, focused atmosphere turned rigid. She marched through the store with her clipboard like a warden on patrol, already scolding Lauren for not restocking napkins the night before. Her voice was sharp and loud enough to cut through the air. Lauren's shoulders visibly tightened, and she simply nodded without protest. Michael felt his hands curl into fists, but he remained silent, still needing to gather more before making a move. As the doors opened and customers streamed in, the environment quickly descended into another frenzy. The staff scrambled short-handed once again, trying to balance customer service with production. Throughout the morning, Michael noticed Tracy continuing her pattern, hovering near the register, criticizing every minor error but never offering to help. When Chloe, the youngest employee on the team, struggled to memorize a complicated coffee order, Tracy raised her voice for everyone to hear. "Do you even know how to read a ticket, or is that too hard for you?" Chloe flushed and looked down at the floor while fumbling with the espresso machine. A couple of customers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly aware that something was off. Michael observed it all, how Tracy's presence didn't just fail to uplift the team, it actively made things worse. There was no support, no encouragement, no leadership, just pressure and public shaming. During a brief lull, Michael found a quiet moment to speak with Lauren near the prep station. "Is it always like this?" he asked casually, pretending he was just making conversation. Lauren gave a bitter half-laugh. "Pretty much. This is one of the busiest locations, but we're always short-staffed. People don't stay long either. Tracy pushes them out, or they burn out and leave on their own." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Have you ever tried talking to corporate?" She stopped mid-scoop and looked at him like he'd just suggested building a rocket in the break room. "Let me save you the trouble," she said. "Corporate doesn't care. Tracy's been here forever. She knows how to make the numbers look good, and that's all that matters to them. As long as sales are strong, no one looks at what's actually going on in here." That comment sat heavy in Michael's chest. He had trusted people like Tracy to uphold the company's values, to care for the teams the way he had always envisioned. But hearing Lauren say it so plainly with that quiet certainty born from repeated disappointment was like being slapped with the truth. He wasn't just dealing with a management issue. This was cultural decay. Tracy had built an ecosystem of fear and control, and no one had questioned it because it looked good on paper. And worse, the corporate office, his office, had enabled it by valuing metrics over people. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt ashamed of what his company had become. The rush wore on into the afternoon, and with every interaction Michael witnessed, he became more convinced that this wasn't an isolated incident. The toxic atmosphere had taken root and spread subtly, quietly, dangerously. Tracy, who should have been a mentor and leader, had become the store's greatest obstacle. And the rest of the team, they were simply surviving. By the time he removed his apron for the day, Michael knew something with absolute clarity. If change didn't come from the top and come fast, Golden Hearth Bakery would continue to lose not just good employees, but its soul. And that was a loss he couldn't afford. The bakery's pace hadn't slowed much by the time the clock struck 2 p.m. Michael had just helped a customer choose between two types of sourdough when he noticed Tracy hovering near the front counter. Again, her expression etched with perpetual disapproval. A teenage worker named Ethan had accidentally rung up the wrong item, and before he could fix it, Tracy's voice sliced through the space. "Are you seriously this careless, or is this just your thing now?" The customer, clearly embarrassed on Ethan's behalf, gave a tight smile and stepped away. Michael had had enough. He knew that if he didn't start asking the hard questions now, the silence would continue to rot the core of the bakery. Later that afternoon, during a brief lull, Michael approached Tracy near the storage area. He kept his tone neutral, casual, even. "Hey, Tracy," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's been pretty hectic today. Think we could use another set of hands up front?" Tracy didn't even look at him as she answered, "And who exactly are you to tell me how to run my store?" Michael kept his composure. "I'm not telling you what to do. Just thought it might help." Tracy scoffed, shaking her head. "I've been doing this longer than you've been baking. If you can't keep up, maybe this job isn't for you." And with that, she turned and walked away, clipboard in hand, like a badge of untouchable authority. It wasn't just her refusal to listen that struck Michael. It was the absolute confidence in her own immunity. She knew no one above her would question her authority. Her voice was the only one that mattered, and it echoed through the store like law. That evening, while she was tucked away in her office, Michael pulled Lauren aside. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. She glanced around nervously. "If Tracy sees us talking too long, she'll find a reason to yell." "I'll keep it quick," Michael promised. "If you could change one thing about how this place is run, what would it be?" Lauren hesitated, then let out a slow sigh. "We need support. More staff fair, scheduling, and a manager who doesn't make us feel like we're always one mistake away from being fired." But honestly, she shrugged, "Nothing's going to change. Corporate doesn't care about people like me." Her answer hit like a gut punch, not because it was new, but because it was consistent. Over the past few days, Michael had heard similar things whispered from Chloe, from Ethan, even from the delivery driver, who only came twice a week. There was a quiet consensus among them. Nothing they said would ever make it past the glass walls of headquarters. Tracy, meanwhile, had perfected the art of manipulation. She knew how to report the right numbers, gloss over staffing issues, and present herself as indispensable. Her store always hit sales targets, but it was on the backs of burned-out workers held together by fear. Michael realized with growing alarm that Tracy wasn't just a bad manager, she was a symptom of a larger systemic failure. As the day drew to a close, Michael took a slow lap around the store. Chloe was sweeping up crumbs near the coffee bar, while Lauren was restocking the display case. Ethan, still visibly shaken from the earlier scolding, was quietly checking inventory in the back. Tracy had already clocked out early, mumbling something about having more important things to do. As soon as she left, the entire mood of the place lifted. Staff spoke more freely. There was even laughter. It was as if a heavy curtain had been drawn aside, allowing light to enter. That was the moment. Michael knew he couldn't wait any longer. Observation had run its course. It was time for action. That night, Michael didn't go home. Instead, he drove straight to the company's regional office. He spent hours compiling his notes, cross-referencing Tracy's recent reports with what he'd witnessed firsthand. The discrepancies were glaring. Her glowing performance reviews were paper-thin illusions hiding a work environment built on fear and silence. Michael sat at the head of the long oak conference table, staring down at the documents. This wasn't just one bad apple. If Tracy had gotten away with this for years, how many others had too? How many other stores were suffering in silence while management hid behind spreadsheets? By dawn, Michael had already drafted a plan. No more relying on second-hand reports, no more rewarding managers who exploited their teams to chase numbers. Starting today, he would call an emergency meeting with the executive team and launch a full-scale internal audit. Every store, every manager. No exceptions. But first, he had unfinished business downtown. Tracy's reign was over, and for the first time since putting on that black apron, Michael finally felt like the leader Golden Hearth Bakery needed him to be. Michael didn't sleep that night. The moment he left the downtown bakery, he drove straight to headquarters, fueled by adrenaline and a growing sense of moral urgency. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot of the Golden Hearth corporate office, Michael was already seated at the head of the executive boardroom table. He had summoned the leadership team for an emergency meeting, and although most of them were used to polished agendas and carefully curated slide decks, what they walked into that morning was entirely different. Michael stood by the whiteboard, tie-loosened sleeves, rolled up not as a CEO making projections, but as a man who had just witnessed the unraveling of his company's soul. The executives filtered in, one by one, exchanging puzzled glances, sensing the weight in the room. When they were seated, Michael wasted no time. "We have a problem," he said, his voice calm but firm, "and it's bigger than any of us thought." A few brows furrowed. Linda, the VP of Operations, leaned forward. "What kind of problem?" Michael looked around the table, locking eyes with each of them. "I went undercover at our busiest downtown bakery. I worked alongside our team for 2 full days. What I saw there was unacceptable. Our employees are overworked, undervalued, and silenced by fear. One of our longest-standing store managers is running her team through intimidation and emotional abuse." He paused, letting the silence sink in. "We've built a culture that looks great on paper, but beneath the surface it's breaking people." He then detailed everything he had witnessed. Tracy's demeaning behavior, the emotional toll on Lauren and the rest of the staff, the toxic, fear-based environment, and the manipulation of performance reports. The room grew quiet. No one interrupted. No one dared. Michael's words carried the force of someone who had not just read the facts, but lived them. He pulled out copies of Tracy's performance reports and laid them next to the notes he had taken during his shifts. The contrast was damning. "We've been rewarding the wrong people," he said, "and we've been blind because we've stopped listening to the people who matter most." He let that land before continuing. "Effective immediately, we're launching a full internal audit of every single Golden Hearth location. No more relying solely on reports. I want every district manager physically present in the field. I want unfiltered feedback directly from employees." There was a shift in the room. Concern turned into action. Some nodded slowly, others began jotting notes. Linda, pale but composed, spoke up. "Do you think this is happening at other stores?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I'm not going to assume it's an isolated case, not anymore. If one store can become this toxic under our noses, then we have to assume others might be struggling too. And it's our job to find out." He turned back to the table. "We cannot fix what we refuse to face, and we can't afford to hide behind metrics any longer." There were no objections. The tone in the room had changed from confusion to resolve. Everyone understood this wasn't just about one store. It was about protecting the heart of the company itself. Once the meeting ended, Michael made a quiet call to human resources. He gave a detailed report and instructed them to begin processing Tracy's immediate termination. There was no need for further interviews or back and forth. He had seen everything firsthand. "Ensure she receives everything owed to her," he said, "but make it clear there is no place for that kind of leadership here." By noon, he was already in the car, heading back to the downtown bakery, not as a trainee this time, but as himself. He wore his signature navy blazer, crisp shirt, and no disguise. When he stepped through the front door, the store fell into silence. Lauren froze at the pastry case. Chloe's eyes widened. Even Ethan, who had been restocking behind the counter, nearly dropped his clipboard. Tracy was mid-lecture with an employee about the speed of table cleanup when she turned and saw Michael standing there. Her face went white. "Mr. Turner," she stammered. Clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. "What brings you?" Michael raised a hand gently. "Lauren, Chloe, Ethan," he said with a small smile. "Can I speak with Tracy privately for a moment?" The employees glanced at each other and quickly stepped into the back room, their expressions full of confusion and barely contained curiosity. Michael turned to Tracy. "Let's talk in your office." Once inside the small space, the door closed quietly behind him. His tone remained calm but unshakably firm. "I've spent the last 2 days working alongside this team, watching how you lead, how you speak to your staff, how you create fear instead of trust." Tracy opened her mouth to speak, but Michael continued without pause. "You've been here long enough to know what Golden Hearth stands for, and yet you've done the opposite. You've manipulated reports, silenced your team, and created a toxic culture that we can no longer ignore. Effective, immediately, you are terminated." Her mouth hung open in disbelief. "Terminated, wait. Mr. Turner." This decision is final," he said sharply. "You will receive your final paycheck and benefits, but your time here is over." For a long moment, Tracy said nothing. Then, without further protest, she gathered her things and walked out of the office. Michael followed shortly after and found Lauren and the others waiting, their expressions unreadable. "Can we talk for a moment?" he asked. They gathered in the seating area, still unsure of what to expect. Michael looked at them, really looked, and saw a mixture of hope and apprehension in their eyes. "You've all been working under very difficult conditions," he began. "And I want to start by saying, I'm sorry. We let you down. But that changes today." He paused. "Tracy is no longer with Golden Hearth. We're bringing in a new manager, someone who's here to support, not control. And we're going to fix the staffing shortages, not just here, but across every location. I promise you, the culture you've endured ends now." Lauren blinked, stunned. Chloe covered her mouth. Ethan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. In that moment, the store felt lighter, like a storm had finally passed. And Michael, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, certainty that he was finally leading with purpose again. 2 days after Tracy's departure, the downtown Golden Hearth bakery began to feel like a completely different place. The tension that had once gripped the air so tightly had loosened like a pressure valve finally released. The team wasn't just moving, they were breathing. For the first time in what felt like months, the rhythm of the store had a natural flow, and at the heart of it all was Lauren, newly promoted to assistant manager. Michael had made the announcement himself the morning after Tracy's termination, standing before the team with a quiet pride in his voice. "You've carried this bakery on your back. Lauren," he said, "now I want you to help lead it officially. Effective immediately, your assistant manager. And this time, we're going to make sure you have the support you deserve." Lauren had blinked in disbelief at first, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. But when the words finally registered, her lips parted in a silent gasp. A few of her co-workers clapped instinctively, and Chloe had even teared up a little in the corner. It wasn't just a promotion, it was validation, a sign that the quiet, unseen effort she had given day after day had finally been noticed. With a slight tremble in her voice, Lauren had said, "Thank you. I don't know what to say." Michael had smiled. "Just help me make this place what it was always meant to be." And with that, the shift had begun, not just in title, but in energy. That same afternoon, a new face walked through the front door. Rachel Grant, a seasoned manager from another Golden Hearth location, known for her calm demeanor and servant leadership. Rachel didn't walk in with a clipboard or a commanding tone. She walked in with a smile and an apron already in her hands. "Where do you need me?" she asked. Lauren showed her around, still adjusting to her new role, and within minutes, Rachel was elbow deep in the morning prep. She joked with Chloe, while folding pastry boxes helped Ethan organize the dry storage and made it clear that she wasn't there to bark orders. She was there to lift the team. The transformation was almost immediate. With Rachel's presence and Lauren's rising confidence, a new rhythm began to take hold, one built on trust, collaboration, and respect. In the days that followed, the bakery came alive again. Lauren quickly adapted to her leadership position, balancing task management with kindness. She checked in with Chloe, regularly made sure Ethan took proper breaks, and worked closely with Rachel to fine-tune the daily workflow. Michael continued to drop in unannounced, not to inspect, but to support. He would roll up his sleeves when the store got busy, chat with customers, and watch the quiet magic of change unfold before his eyes. Even the customers began to notice. "There's something different here," one elderly woman commented while sipping her coffee. "The energy, it just feels warmer." Another regular nodded, adding, "It's like everyone behind the counter is finally allowed to smile again." Chloe, once timid and nervous, now greeted customers with confidence, even recommending pastries with genuine excitement. "I've got something fresh, just out of the oven. You've got to try it," she would say, and customers listened. Lauren, who used to keep her head down to survive the shift, now stood tall behind the counter, guiding her team with steady assurance. One afternoon, a customer accidentally knocked over their coffee, and before they could apologize, Lauren and Rachel were already there, cleaning it up together, laughing as they did. "No worries at all," Rachel said with a grin. "Happens to the best of us." The customer laughed along, touched by the ease and kindness in the interaction. Rachel, true to form, never acted like she was above the team. She led with empathy, often reminding staff that perfection wasn't the goal. Presence was. She implemented weekly check-ins where employees could anonymously share concerns or ideas. She even created a rotating team spotlight board that celebrated small wins. Chloe mastered the latte foam today, or Ethan restocked dry goods faster than Amazon Prime. These weren't grand gestures, but they mattered. They made the team feel seen. Under her leadership, the bakery didn't just run, it flourished. And under Lauren's guidance, it finally felt like a workplace where growth was possible, where effort was rewarded, and where kindness was the new normal. Michael, watching from the sidelines, felt something he hadn't in years. Hope, not just for this one store, but for the entire company. What had begun as a hidden crisis had become a turning point. Golden Hearth's heart was beating again and stronger than ever. The days of fear and silence were behind them. In their place stood a new culture rooted in dignity, driven by purpose, and led by people who finally felt empowered to make it thrive. 2 weeks later, Michael Turner found himself standing once again outside the downtown Golden Hearth bakery, this time with no disguise, no clipboard, and no hidden motive. The sun was bright overhead, and the aroma of fresh-baked bread drifted out through the slightly cracked front door. It was strange how familiar the place felt, and yet how different it had become in such a short time. He didn't need a secret name tag or a fake story to walk in today. He was here not as an undercover boss, but as a man coming back to witness the change he had sparked, and the moment he stepped inside, he knew the bakery had come back to life. The atmosphere was entirely transformed. Gone was the tension, the anxious glances, the silent stress. In its place was a calm, coordinated energy that flowed from the team behind the counter. Lauren, now confidently wearing her assistant manager badge, was laughing softly as she guided Chloe through a new register shortcut. Ethan stood nearby, helping stock a display of pastries while exchanging jokes with a customer. And Rachel, ever present and ever grounded, was wiping down a table while chatting casually with a regular guest. Every corner of the store carried the same message: things were not just better, they were thriving. As Michael moved closer to the counter, several heads turned in recognition, and then something happened. He hadn't expected. Lauren stepped out from behind the pastry case, holding a small white envelope. "We wanted you to have this," she said, offering it with both hands. Inside was a simple thank you card signed by every member of the bakery team. The messages were handwritten, some with shaky lines, others in looping cursive. Thank you for listening. I didn't think anyone up there cared. You gave us our store back. Michael read each one silently. His heart full, he looked up to find his team watching him, hopeful, grateful and proud. This means more to me than you know, he said quietly. But the truth is, you gave it back to yourselves. You just needed the chance. As he continued his visit, customers approached to shake his hand or offer compliments. Whatever you did, one elderly man said with a chuckle, you've got the magic touch. The staff is happy, the coffee's hotter, and I swear the croissants are flakier. Michael laughed along, humbled and quietly moved. It wasn't magic. It was leadership, finally grounded in presence. He stayed for an hour chatting with staff, observing the subtle rhythm of teamwork and feeling a renewed sense of clarity. This bakery, once the site of emotional breakdowns and whispered frustrations, was now a place of dignity and purpose. Before leaving, Michael called the team together for a quick huddle in the seating area. I want you all to know, he began. What we've done here is just the beginning. The room fell silent, attentive. Starting next month, we'll be launching a company-wide employee feedback system, anonymous, transparent, and directly linked to my office. We're also creating a new district mentorship program, so every store has the tools and support it needs to thrive. But more than anything, he continued, I'm committing myself and this company to never becoming disconnected again. You'll see me in stores more often, not in a suit, not behind a screen, but right here where the real work happens. A ripple of energy ran through the room. Chloe beamed. Ethan nodded in disbelief. Rachel smiled softly, and Lauren blinked back what might have been the beginning of tears. It wasn't just what Michael said, it was the sincerity in his voice. For once, promises weren't made from the safety of a boardroom. They were delivered face-to-face with sleeves rolled and eye contact held. As the team dispersed to return to their work, Michael stayed behind for just a few more minutes, soaking in the moment. The clink of coffee mugs, the quiet chatter of satisfied customers, the sound of genuine laughter behind the counter. It was everything he had hoped to restore, and more. As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, the afternoon light casting a long shadow behind him, Michael paused and looked back through the bakery window. He saw Lauren training a new hire, Rachel smiling at a toddler who had just dropped a muffin, and Chloe confidently handling the register. This was the Golden Hearth. He had always envisioned not just a place to buy pastries, but a space that gave people a reason to stay, to return, to belong. He knew the work wasn't done. In fact, it was just beginning. But for the first time in years, Michael felt he had truly earned the title of CEO, not because of the empire he'd built, but because of the lives he had decided to lead with. As Michael walked away from the bakery that day, he wasn't just leaving behind a store. He was stepping into a new chapter of leadership, one where people mattered more than performance charts, and where listening became more powerful than speaking. His journey was a reminder that change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in break rooms on the floor with the people we too often overlook. At Deep Inside HQ, we believe that behind every company, every uniform, and every paycheck, there's a story waiting to be heard. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss the next powerful journey into the heart of humanity. Your voice matters. Your presence counts. Let's build a world where empathy leads and impact follows.